Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Modernizing Information Governance. I'm Teresa Resick, the Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Steve Weissman of Holly Group and Tara Combs from Alfresco. And Alfresco is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we get started, just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows. And across the bottom of your screen is the list of all of the widgets that are available to you. And one of those widgets is Group Chat, and just open that by clicking on the icon. And with Group Chat, you'll be able to text, chat, communicate with each other, and also with a few of us from here at AIIM. Do ask questions of the speakers throughout the hour using the Q&A feature, and that's to the left of the slide area. And we will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them, but you can also use this feature to ask for technical assistance. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list, and that's to the right of the slide area. And there's also a number of other documents and links that we have in there to help you learn more about today's topic. So just click on any of those links at any time, and those resources will open in a new browser tab, and you can save those and read them after the webinar. And at the end of this webinar, a brief survey will open in your browser, or it is also in the list of widgets below the slide area. And we appreciate if you would take a few moments to offer your feedback and to suggest other topics for us to cover. And right now, I'd like to introduce our featured speakers that we have with us today. And Steve Weissman is an expert consultant, trainer, and speaker who specializes in best practices for content management, records management, and business process improvement. A business-minded expert in technology planning and adoption, he is the InfoGov guy, and by leveraging an exceptional ability to pinpoint critical success factors, he helps clients work better and work better together just to get total maximum value from their information and those technologies. Steve is a certified information professional and an accredited instructor in ECM BPM. And he is a member of the AIIM Company of Fellows and a 4-year president of the AIIM New England chapter. And also joining us today is Tara Combs, and she is the Senior Information Governance and Records Management Specialist for Alfresco. In this role, she demonstrates to potential customers how they can use the Alfresco platform to meet their information governance and records management requirements, and those requirements and mandates, and also use records management modernization as a catalyst for your larger digital transformation needs. And prior to joining Alfresco, Tara worked extensively in the enterprise content management and records management market space as a solutions consultant for government and corporate organizations. Tara has served as a records management consultant at the Department of Justice, and she helped the Joint Chiefs of Staff implement one of the first electronic records management systems in the U.S. government. So right now, I'm going to turn things over to Steve Weissman to begin his talk today. Steve?
Oh, you can't threaten me like that. Oh, I guess you can. Well, thanks, Teresa, and hello, everybody. Really glad to be able to do this with you all today. And I also want to say that was a wonderful introduction. I couldn't have said it better if I had written it myself. Somebody cue the rim shot. All right. When I was first asked to come and help kind of set the stage for modernization of records and information management, you know, I began to think about it a little, and then I received the description about this session, and I thought, really, Teresa, you hit it right on the head by asking right up front, how do you know if you're using outdated technologies and inefficient processes? I mean, for most organizations, the answer is something like, well, we're doing the best we can to keep it under control, and everything seems to be going okay. So it's the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But a lot of times it is broke or breaking, but you're so used to it that you don't give it a second thought, and you might not know what you're missing because you're just accepting things as they appear to be. So it's not really a matter of how hard you think you're trying, and I found this quote that's on the screen now. If I were to click the button, then it would be. Here we go. You know, it's not enough to do your best. You have to know what to do as well. and then do your best at that. I just thought that summed it up so well, and a lot of the work that I do with clients really, falls under the umbrella of, let's see where you are today, and let's figure out where it is you want to be and look at the steps necessary to bridge today until tomorrow. Some of this stuff generally is fine, but a lot of the stuff is outdated. And a lot of times, a lot of that stuff, if you will, isn't even necessarily technological in a major way. A lot of it's business process, and a lot of it is sort of the attendant technologies around the bigger guns to help modernize the whole thing, take the burden off the people and apply it towards the technology so things can happen automatically. Now, I love this cartoon, looking at the cartoons to make points, as you can tell, because it's a great example of how things can look okay from a distance, but when you get up close and personal, you realize stuff's missing. It's really not okay. We have the appearance of a well-oiled machine, but in point of fact, there are things that we can do to help make it run even more smoothly. So really the best way to tell if things are really up to snuff is to take a step back and really investigate whether your practices are getting the job done. And what you realize is, the best indicator of maybe this isn't working so well is when you find out that things really aren't getting done, or they're not getting done as effectively and efficiently as they might be. Now, I spent a lot of time working with organizations from government agencies, large and small, to industrial contractors, utilities, really up and down the size and vertical market chains. And it's really interesting because very often the signs of their times are the same. The things that really bother them are things like they can't find stuff, or they can't find the right stuff, or they can't find the right stuff right when they need it. They can't share it, which really makes the compliance people tear their hair out because they have to do things that is according to a regulated schedule, and they just can't pull the information together out of other people. They can't secure it. They can't report on it. These are sort of, what's the song from The Sound of Music, right? My favorite things. And I'm always curious when I talk before a group, be it live in person or live online such as today, to ask you what really bugs you the most right now. What's not working at your place? So if I've done the buttons at all correctly, there should be a poll on your screen or just coming up. Teresa, maybe you can help me with these mechanics, just to sort of take a measure of, are these the things that are bugging all you guys right now?
Yeah, hi, Steve. Poll's getting ready to stream out to the audience for just a second. And just as Steve has read over this list, we have a poll question here, and appreciate it if that's going to appear in about 5 more seconds on your screen. But we just want to know what's not working at your place. What are the pain points that you're experiencing? And so we just want you to see, is your main issue that you just can't find the stuff, can't find the right stuff when you need it, you can't share it, can't secure it, or is it all of the above? And it's just one of those situations, we kind of think we have it curious to see if our expectations are actually how you guys are going to be answering the question. So come on up to your keyboards, answer the question. You can see the poll question now. And so just looking to have, Steve, I know just, AIIM, yes, we're a nonprofit, but we are a small business and a small staff, and our staff is around the world. And so even we have our challenges for finding stuff or finding it when we need it, especially if we didn't create it ourselves. So even just a small staff of less than 25 people, we even experience these same challenges. So just curious to see where your greatest pain point is right now. And let's go ahead and take a look at the results on here. And Steve, just looking to see, was this kind of what you were expecting results-wise?
I'd say so. I was going to say I love the fact, and I won't say I love it. It's like clicking like on Facebook even when it's bad news. You know, there's not a lot of choices. So it's not that I like it, but I'm particularly taken by the fact that our highest performer of these choices is all of the above. And I find that to be very typical, that they are related. And we'll talk about and around a lot of the attendant issues as we continue forward here. But a lot of times it comes back to the same points, the same needs, the same lack of modernization, shall we say, about how information is classified so that it can be searched and found and utilized. So they do interrelate. And the good news is that there's often just one thing, really, that is at the foundation, at the heart of what makes these things painful. Another of my favorite quotes from the movie City Slickers, if anybody who's joined us remembers that film. It's at this point it's kind of an oldie, but it's wonderful. Jack Palance is the rough and tumble cowboy, and Billy Crystal is the city slicker, essentially trying to figure out the meaning of life while on a cattle drive. But the character that Palance playing is Curly. He says, you know what the secret of life is? Just one thing. Once you figure that out, you stick to that, and everything else doesn't mean bananas. I'm paraphrasing. And I love that because it really applies to what we're talking about here. The one thing in our case is a simple question with an often surprisingly difficult question to answer. And that is, what business problems are you trying to solve? I will someday make a T-shirt that asks that, and underneath it will say the rest is just details. But really, you can have the best technology in the world and really good processes to move the information around. But if you don't know what that information is going to be used for, you know, why those records are still kicking around, then you're not going to get the value from your overall situation that you want to and that you need to. So it really is fundamentally the one thing to focus on as you begin to think about this question of modernization. What are you trying to do? What business problems are you trying to solve? And then let's work our way towards the technologies and see that our thinking is aligned with what really ought to be the only motivating factor that you have. So here's another fun illustration of what I'm talking about. And I put this up here because we often either forget to ask that one fundamental question, or we lose focus on it because things happen. A lot of times our solutions are forced on us by circumstance, like depicted here, where we're being chased by something big and angry. Sometimes by decree. And all too often it happens because something bad happened to our organization or is about to. You know, there's an audit, a compliance audit coming up, or we're being sued, or, you know, we have to do something because there's some big issue confronting us, and now we have to kind of rush to judgment. Now, the good news is you may end up with solutions to the problem. The bad news is you've really done it for the wrong reason. And while you averted a particular crisis, you haven't really thought through what else does that mean for your organization. Have we really moved the ball down the field at all in terms of the care and feeding of our information? Or have we just averted that one problem? So, you know, here, we have to outrun the mammoth. We're not really interested in eating right and getting exercise, which are both important, but we probably wouldn't be doing them except that we're being chased by a mammoth. And now that I think about it, I think mammoths are vegetarians anyway, aren't they? Or weren't they? Anyhow, you get the point, I hope. So I like to work with my clients and really start as basic as we can. What business problems are we trying to solve? Let's take a process-eyed view of what you need to do. And at its most simplistic, you have to get your information from somewhere. You have to use it for something. And you have to get rid of it or do something with it. And by the way, yes, you do. Keeping stuff forever, I was going to say just to hedge my bet, is rarely a good idea. But I think it's probably never a good idea. There are reasons we have retention schedules to deal with. Because someone a while ago figured out we don't need to keep this stuff forever, and it can be a legal liability. If nothing else, it can be a literal fire hazard, as in all the places I've been that have just stacks of boxes in the hallways and in the basement, and in one case blocking the exit stairs from the basement to the outside world. Their motivation, their woolly mammoth, was the fire warden saying, get rid of that stuff. Because if somebody is in the basement and a fire begins, it's not going to be a happy outcome. So some of this stuff is seemingly really completely disconnected from information management, and yet that's the solution. So you really, take that step back right at the start and think about what it is you have to do and what it is as a next step that you need to use. So none of this is rocket science. From a technological standpoint, we have to capture stuff and classify it to get it in and know what it is, so we can apply metadata and retention schedules and things all kind of in the same first shot it can be done. We've got to store it. We've got to archive it if we're keeping it. Either way, we've got to secure it until it's time to get rid of it. We've got to route it around someplace because people need it, because if they don't need it, why did we bother to capture it in the first place? At the end of the chain, we have to either retain it properly or dispose of it properly. And, I even love that because to me it's almost ironic that to properly dispose of records, you need to create a record certifying that your record has been disposed of. So there's always a catch and there's always something. But the good news is that a lot of this can be automated. And I'll say that the earlier in this flow that you automate it, the better off you are, because the effects of that automation get felt downstream from where you apply it. So if you don't do anything to automate until you get to the routing phase, you've missed opportunities earlier to really help yourself along, and help yourself along in a way that, if you do it right, nobody even has to know it's there. It just works. And that's really what we're after here. And for me, when I think about modernizing records and information management, I think about putting in tools and technologies that can work their magic, that can help us solve the business problems that we've identified up front, and do it in a way that's not in anybody's face. Certainly not anybody that doesn't need to know about it. So on the back end, your IT people, you as a records manager, those kind of instigators of all this modernized goodness, you need to know about it. But the rest of the world, the rest of your organization doesn't really. They just have to know that it works. And the way that they know it works is we go back to that poll with all those questions of things that you can't do. They know it works when suddenly they can do all those things. They don't have to care how it happens. You don't even want them to care how it happens. The important thing is that it happens and that you put it in place as early in the process as you can so all of that goodness can trickle through. Now, the magic pill here, and I don't want to use the dirty word and scare anybody, but you can really call it machine learning and artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about the soul-sucking, job-destroying kind of AI that's so popular today among naysayers and doom-tellers, but I'm talking about the good kind that actually makes our lives better. A popular, positive, in-your-face technology of this sort is something like Siri. It's a machine that, at least theoretically, is making our lives easier because we can just talk to the machine in our own usual language and get back search results or product information or whatever we're looking for in the same way. That doesn't happen by magic. The machine learns from what you're saying and how you're saying it and applies some artificial intelligence to figure out what it is you're asking it for. So, I say this very definitively and very deliberately because I often find the whole conversation colored by the scare tactics. I don't believe in a world run by robots. I don't think that's happening tomorrow. I'm not sure that's happening maybe ever. But certainly within the context of what we're talking about here today, you're missing out if you're not looking for opportunities to apply these things to the way your records and information is being managed. The net of it is the technology today, it's been available for a while. It just gets better and better all the time. It can extrapolate tons of information from and about the content in front of them. And it can make decisions based on what they see. And just as it's true with people, with these technologies, they work better the more stuff they see because they learn as they go. What that means is the people are left to handle the exceptions. There'll always be exceptions. There will always be things the system isn't sure about. But isn't it so much more efficient to deal with a much smaller volume of questions than the whole pile, including things that are very straightforward? So just to put the fine point on it, what we're talking about are things like automatically identifying classes of records and documents, because the systems can innately recognize or programmatically, easy for me to say, recognize this is an invoice, that's a contract, this other thing's a credit card application. And they can apply the proper metadata and routing information and retention information to each one so you don't have to. This stuff is real, it's present, it works. And you may not feel like you're missing it because what's happening today at your place seems to be working just fine. But a lot of times it's worth taking a little look and seeing where can this be applied and is it worth it in terms of time and money. We want to run it here. Do we want to buy or essentially rent something that's being run in the cloud? Lots of questions that you won't even get to if you don't first step back and think about what the problem is you're trying to solve and what may be available to help you solve it. So, there's a new movie, so we have to use the Star Wars reference because they'll get drummed out of the consultant's corps otherwise. But I always loved that line in one of the early pictures, right? These aren't the droids you're looking for. And I say, well, maybe they are. I mean, we're talking about machines that don't look like these two. We're talking about things that are shaped like scanners and monitors and other accoutrements of the modern day office. But I have no doubt they're just as capable of making unattended decisions as our Star Wars friends here are when it comes to classifying records or moving them to another system or not, and the like. Whether those are the right decisions, though, depends entirely on how and how well you set them up. So we're not looking to divorce the human element from this, but simply take the repetitive burden off our backs and let the systems do what the systems can do and free us up maybe to do, more fun things, I suppose. So I've touched on this just a little bit, but I want to just come back and state it more explicitly. That one of the most important things you need to do is strike a balance between trying to modernize and modernizing to a degree that you're doing more than you'll ever see a return on. There is such a thing as overkill. What's weird is that most of what we're talking about, as I've noted, lives below the surface of our day-to-day operations, and that's exactly the point. Because what we're talking about is modernizing your approach to records management and information governance You don't have to see it in your face unless you're one of those who's responsible for making it work and keeping it going. No doubt this is why our friends at Alfresco call it invisible IG, but I'll let them speak to that in just a minute. Before I let you go for the moment and turn it over, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of things to think about. First and foremost, how automated do you want to be? Which parts of the process do you want to automate? Will your existing systems even support any of this? Which vendor offerings can move up and down the functional scale, as you do? You know, that's kind of where you get to the overkill question. What are the trade-offs associated with managing your records in place versus moving them to a cloud or something in between? There are issues of efficiency and security and compliance and interoperability that have to be measured and weighed here. They're all good options. You want to make sure you find the one that works best for you. And then a question that I often get, which is how concerned should I be with future-proofing? Things move and develop and innovate all the time. I don't want to be left behind, but I don't want to put in stuff that I may never touch. How do I balance that? And my answer to that is yes, even though it's not a yes or no question. You want to be as concerned as your budget and resources allow. If you don't, it's easy to find yourself back where you are again sooner than you think you will. But at the same time, it's easy to overbuy because there always will be new technology to be had. So you want to stay abreast, but you don't have to write a new check each time something new comes out. In this, I relate it to the latest and greatest smartphones, where years and years ago, the way we used to look and examine and buy personal computers. Because you knew as soon as you bought one, next week there's going to be a better one. In 6 months, something even you can't imagine today. So we have to think about what we lose in the intervening period by not having something more modern versus waiting until the next modern thing comes out, because that just restarts the ticker anyway. So it is very much a balancing act. I am moving my hands like a scale up and down in a way that you can't see. But there is lots to think about. And I know next we're going to see some of this in a little more granular fashion. So I will leave you just with this briefly. I think we come back to it later just so you know how to get hold of me. And we'll count to 3 and then click the button so that I'll go get something to drink. You're tired of listening to me, and we'll turn it over to Tara, who can dig into this in a little less academic way. So go ahead, Tara, and thank you all.
Thanks, Steve. So we're going to talk about 3 topics for modernizing records management today, but there are a lot more things that we could talk about, with everything from meeting GDPR to New York cybersecurity that just got enacted in August to implementing blockchain as a way of non-repudiating your records. But we're going to focus on what I call invisible information governance today, manage in place, and cloud adoption. So starting with invisible information governance, I'm trying to get everybody to kind of coin that, but it's really all about automating records management and your governance process. And there's 3 ways of doing that. And the first way is starting with your auto classification engines. And some items to consider when you're doing that is looking at those engines. First is big data scale. So can those systems deal with the massive amounts of data that your organization is going to have? And of course, that's going to depend on the type of organization and the industry that you're in, whether, it's financial services or health or energy. And those organizations are dealing with tremendous amounts of data on a daily basis. And can those engines ingest that and even govern it? There's one organization I know that gets over 1 million emails a day, and they're trying to auto-classify those and file those in the correct bucket in the filing plan. And can those auto-classification engines handle that? but also then starting to incorporate, machine learning engines in there as well. So things like Watson, Effisoft, and Amazon just released Macy a couple months ago. And then there's also open source engines like TensorFlow. So we actually have a customer that's using TensorFlow, and they're ingesting, unstructured content, and they're doing semantic intent on that unstructured content to determine is, the John Doe that's mentioned in these 5 documents the same John Doe that's mentioned in these 10 other documents. And if that's the case, should we be opening an investigation on this and flagging this person and monitoring, his patterns to see what's going on, and is he somebody that we should be investigating? So, a lot of these engines are getting very sophisticated as to what you can do. Also, to run analytics on both the structured and unstructured data so that you're mitigating your risk and ensuring compliance on that content. And then you want to run reporting, which is really, statistical analysis on that data, showing how it was classified, or statistical sampling, ensuring that you're getting your 90% and above in case you do have to go to court and prove that, your engine is working the way that it needs to be working to make sure it's classifying records properly. And do those engines have some industry-specific knowledge bases? So if you're financial services, or if you're health insurance, are there common schemas or common classifications already embedded in those engines so that you don't have to teach it from scratch? Are they already embedded in those engines so that you can take advantage of those and don't have to teach everything from scratch? The second is, we talked about auto classification, so intelligent classification, and that's not really so much on structured content as it's on structured metadata around that content. So looking at the metadata around that content and using a business rules engine to evaluate that metadata and determine the type of record it is, and being able to file it in the proper location on the file plan to make sure that it is the proper type of record. So based on the fact that I filed it in this location in the repository, I can add metadata to it because I know I saved it in this folder, so it's this type of record, and I can declare it a record, and therefore I know it's going to go in this location in the file plan. So again, I can automate that declaration process and filing process and take the burden off the end user. So I like our little, again, tagline there, effective governance is invisible governance. So that's where I got the invisible information governance idea from. And then last but not least, using business process to automate that as well. So when you have things like case management systems where you're doing things like SOP review or policy review or claims adjustment, or account open, you know what type of record it is as it's going through these process. So at the end of that process, where in the file plan it belongs. So go ahead and file it in the file plan at the end of the process. You can also, if you don't know what type of record it is, send it for a record review through the records office or the records manager, and let the process go ahead then and do the records declaration and filing as part of the business process. And then you can also automate some of the AIIM process. So, a review and approval for the disposition of records, and let the process do the destruction process. You have e-discovery requests, so tracking the systems that are searched and the results that are collected for the review and the redaction before it gets sent to a discovery tool. And the processes for legal holds or even physical record circulation, tracking the request to the warehouse for these records, tracking that they were sent to a person and have that person acknowledge that they received them, or even boxing up and sending to the warehouse and updating the location properties of those physical records can be all part of a business process. So all of those things can happen automatically, again, taking the burden off the end user to participate in the system. So they're not having to be a records manager. They can focus on doing their normal job, which again leads to better user adoption of the systems. So manage in place is the second topic, and this is a well-known information governance specialist from the UK, and he did this cartoon a couple years ago, and he said most records never leave their system of origin, which is true. So when you think of, not only your traditional enterprise content management systems, but also things like ERP systems or Salesforce systems or CRM systems like Salesforce, typically things never leave those systems, but there are records in those systems that need to be captured. So that's where we're seeing a big push towards manage in place today. And there's a lot of benefits to that because you have a centralized system for your records management policies where the file plans get created in one place, your retention schedules get created there, your disposition actions occur there, your holds occur, all from a single interface. And it gives you one solution for all these disparate siloed systems, which in turn leads to faster implementations of your records management systems. It also allows organizations to have business processes that don't have to change from system to system. So you've implemented them in your siloed system. You don't have to redo them in the new system. They're going to remain the same because you're managing everything from a central location. Again, which leads to better user adoption because the end user is still going to work in the system that they're used to working in, and everything's going to be transparent on the back end of them. You also don't have to worry about updating security models and trying to replicate those across the enterprise because, again, you're reaching out and touching those records in the system that they currently live in. But there are a lot of considerations that you do have to think of, and that's how you handle, those records. And that a lot, I'm going to actually skip down to the last bullet first. And that's the type of system that you're trying to manage those records in place. So, things like social media is becoming more and more prevalent. As we know, Twitter seems to be a favorite of our president these days, but Slack, I see a lot of people wanting to capture records from Slack systems today. Facebook, most businesses have Facebook pages, so we're seeing a lot of demand to capture records from those. So social media is very relevant from your traditional enterprise content management systems, SharePoint, Documentum, from structured systems like databases, shared drives, cloud storage. We have a number of organizations that are using S3 buckets, and they don't want to move those content around from those buckets. They want to leave them there and just manage them in place from, again, traditional ERP systems like SAP and CRM systems like Salesforce. So when you look at all those different types of records that you're trying to manage, you do have to take in consideration whether you want to leave them in place and stub them in the records management system, or you want to stub them in place and move them into the records management system, or you want to do a sync copy, or you want to migrate on demand. So as they're being accessed in that system, because they may not be touched for a number of years, then migrate them into the records management system. And again, because there's different options depending on the type of system, you have to take into consideration how you're going to handle security on that. Are you going to sync it across? Are you going to set up a new model? And then how are you going to find all these documents or records when you have, e-discovery searches and you have to collect data for litigation purposes? So again, and place holds on all those different type of content. So a lot of this, again, depends on those different types of systems that you're trying to manage in place. And last but not least, one of my favorite topics is cloud adoption. Cloud adoption, not only for a governance solution, but, across the board, because a lot of people are setting up S3 buckets to replace file servers. But for a governance solution, there was a great article by Brent Claffey a couple of months ago. It was a document strategy article. And he said, he's seeing a big drive towards cloud adoption for a governance solution because usability drives compliance. And what he meant by that is typically, governance solutions are web-based if they're in the cloud, meaning they're browser-based or smartphone or a tablet, and that drives user adoption because people are typically used to using those devices now. They're also subscription-based, which translates to a lower cost to entry because it's an operating expense versus a capital expenditure. Also, they're scalable, very high scalable, so that as the information explosion goes quickly, they can scale up or down as needed. So a couple of examples of that is if you think Netflix may have a marketing campaign where, they'll drop their price for a weekend, and they may have 2,000 subscribers join over that weekend. Well, they actually are AWS's #1 client, so AWS can scale them up to support that volume of 2,000 users being added over a weekend. We also have AWS's second largest customer as one of our customers, and their big scalability period is at month end. And so they may actually add, 1,000 virtual servers at a month end as they're chugging through a huge amount of data during that period. But then they drop back down. So they'll scale up at a month end, and then they'll drop back down to their normal server level after that weekend period or that month end period is over. So they're able to control their cost just for that month end period, and they don't have to maintain that high level of servers over that, that whole period just to support that month end scale that they need. Also, because there's typically less customization, since it's a cloud-based solution, they're able to upgrade as upgrades are released, ensuring that they're getting the latest version of the software that contains those new compliance features. There's also typically a REST API or a Java API, again, latest technology, that allows them to integrate and enable control of those disparate repositories like we talked before, so the whole manage in place technology. You also traditionally see better cost savings. So again, my example is AWS because we're partnered very closely with AWS. And we did this example for a prospect about 3 months ago where we compared the total cost of ownership over a 3-year period using AWS's TCO calculator. And we took things into consideration like server costs, storage costs, network costs, and IT labor. And so for a 3-year period, it was roughly about $3 million on-premise costs versus, I'm trying to get close enough to see these numbers, $1.1 million AWS costs. So again, significant cost savings on-premise versus in the cloud. That also carries across when you look at storage costs. So Amazon has 3 tiers of storage. They have their first bucket, which is S3, which is rapid access, always readily available, 9 eyes. I don't even want to count, but I think it's like 10 nines durability. And that's their first tier bucket. And then they have S3 plus IA as their second tier. It's still rapid access, but it's for content that is accessed less frequently, but still, again, 4 nines availability and still durable. And then they have Glacier for things that are long-term storage, do not need to be accessed that quickly, but may be stored for 100 years or longer. But also may need worm storage, so write once, read many, and may need encryption. And what the durability means is for every 10,000 objects stored for 10 million years, you could expect the loss of a single object, maybe. So that's how durable the Amazon storage is, which I think is pretty durable. But when you start looking at the cost savings there, if you take a large organization, which is 50 terabytes for storage, and you look at the on-premise cost, that's about $45,000. On a S3 bucket, that gets you down to about $14,000. On a Glacier, S3 plus Glacier, that gets you down to about $5,000 or about $5,400. When we look at an extra large storage bucket, which is about 12 petabytes. For an on-premise, that cost you about $7,000 or about $7.1 million a year. For an S3 bucket, it's about $3.2 million a year, and I am rounding up there on these. An S3 plus S3 IA is about $2.2 million, and S3 plus Glacier is about $1.25 million a year. So again, you can see, significant cost savings by going to the cloud, not only in hardware costs, but also in storage cost, and by doing hierarchical storage management on your storage with Amazon. So hopefully you've seen, by thinking about modernizing your records management system, you can gain automation and user adoption by looking at things like auto classification and intelligent classification and adding business process into your records, but also cost savings and user adoption and modernizing your records management systems. So Teresa, I'll turn it back to you now.
Sure, thank you. We've been listening to Tara Combs from Alfresco, and before that was Steve Weissman of Holly Group. And just as a frame of reference, the links that Tara has in this slide here, that's also available in the resources list. That's to the right of the slide area. Highly recommend that you click on all of the resources that are in there. And like I mentioned, they're just going to pop open in a new browser tab, and you can finish saving them off after the webinar. And in addition to what Alfresco put in there's some other really good resources. So highly encourage you to take advantage of that. I do want to squeeze in a question or two here. I know we're getting close on time, and there's so much good information to share. It was just worth not rushing you guys through all of that. So let me get to a question that's come in here. And one of the things, fueled a little bit by the group chat, a couple of us have been having off onto the side here, and I just thought the commentary that we were making would be good to share with everyone in the audience. And someone had commented that once you plan out and execute this invisible information governance, how do you suggest maintaining it, especially if it's with an organization that's undergoing constant change or staff turnovers or a smaller sized organization? I'd like to Steve, let me start with you, but then also want Tara to join in on this. So just from some thoughts and ideas on how to maintain.
Well, first, yes, you have to. I know that wasn't really the question, but a lot of times I find, especially smaller organizations, don't really think about maintenance. So as I wrote in the chat, a lot of times it's viewed as insurance. You don't need that until you need that. To me, the issue of maintenance has less to do with the fact that it's invisible than the fact that it exists at all. It is often a major criterion that leads somebody towards the cloud, because then the cloud provider, theoretically, depending on the arrangement, handles all that maintenance. But kind of tying back to some of Tara's points, when it comes to the users, it's all invisible. So as long as it keeps working, it doesn't really matter what happens with it, with how it gets maintained or what have you, as long as it lets people get their jobs done. Whether those people turn over a lot is almost irrelevant, because it's hidden from them and they just do their jobs. It all happens on the back end. And theoretically, it's the people who designed it, who are maintaining it, like the IT department, where turnover or whatever change, even just changing roles, can often be disruptive to maintenance. So to me, it's less the invisibility as it is to be sure that you have a focus on maintenance, so the technology doesn't end up leaving you behind and it gets sunsetted on you and you didn't realize it because no one was paying attention, or missed opportunities to upgrade. Does that help? How's that?
Yeah, well, I also took I took the comment and the question more from the information governance side and the maintenance of that. And from how I interpreted the question, just thinking of just things like ongoing training and ensuring that what is set up and structured on the invisible side, what is happening on the back end, that is, yeah, that it's reviewed and examined, and does this still meet the business needs, the regulatory needs? Tara, your thoughts and comments on this?
Yeah, so, and as you know, I try to keep things very unbiased when I talk on these things, but it's actually where I really like Alfresco for that reason, because we are open standards and open source. So the whole goal behind our product was it was designed to allow the business user to be able to write these business rules to do this automation. And so you don't have to be a developer in order to create this stuff. And so a records manager can very easily write business rules to automate this stuff. So even though you have staff turnover or you may have constant change, you don't spend a 6-week period training somebody to do this. You could spend a day training somebody to write these rules. So even though you have turnover, it's not like it's going to take, again, a 6-week period to train somebody to care and feed the system. It's going to be a day or 2 day for them to learn how to watch and maintain. And we have, I call it an exception queue, so that when it doesn't know how to handle a record, instead of it going into the wrong area of the file plan, it goes into the exception queue, where then you write a new rule and you train the system now how to handle that type of rule or record. So again, it's more, we're based on, again, open design and for the end users to be able to interact with the system, as opposed for the developers to have to do it.
And if I can just, I see now the different perspectives. I think I'm hung up on the invisibility part, because to me that's not the invisible part. But it's absolutely right that you want to make it as simple as possible for those who need to get their hands dirty to do it as in an uncomplicated way as possible. So in terms of that, to me, that's policy and process as might be encoded in an information governance document of some kind that's written in terms of the roles to be played rather than the individuals that play it. We often use the phrase, oh, we're doing this for the children, not for ourselves, So you kind of pay it forward so that whoever the next sets of hands and eyes and brains that are on the governance initiative can pick right up where their predecessors have left off, whether it relates to how things get done or the technologies that are in place to help automate those things. So I think I'm thinking more in terms of what's invisible and what isn't. But I'm fully behind what Sarah just said. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's where the open source is really starting just to play a bigger role in this whole industry, because, again, it is designed more towards end users than it is developers.
Okay. Okay. Well, I just want to mention a few other resources in general, because we are getting close to the end of our webinar hour. Just join AIIM in San Antonio, Texas for our annual conference that's coming up in April in 2018. And we have some exciting keynote speakers that are getting lined up, but also we have a lot of great educational sessions and a wealth of roundtable discussions. Those roundtable discussions are so valuable because you're sitting there with your peers participating in the conversation. And so that's, I love attending those roundtable discussions. But for more information on the conference in general, just go to aimconference.com and get the latest. And early bird registration ends in January, so go there now, sign up, treat yourself for a nice holiday present, attend the AIIM conference. And I'm very pleased to mention this out to everyone. AIIM has just released a fully updated training program, and it's the AIIM Modern Records Management course, and it gives you a thorough understanding of how to best automate the way digital information is managed and supported in support of the business goals and objectives. And this course covers the entire life cycle of records and provides the skills needed to position records managers as business enablers. And this program in general is available online and is available instructor-led. So go to AIIM.org/MRM to check out more about this new Modern Records Management program that we have. And just want to remind everyone that we have recorded this webinar, and it will be available in the next day or two at AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page. Don't forget to download all of the resources that are available to you. Also a reminder, when the webinar ends, a brief survey is going to open in your desktop. I greatly value your feedback and would like to hear from you, so appreciate if you take a few moments to offer that feedback and to suggest future topics for us to cover. Thank you very much to our underwriter, Alfresco. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs. So thank you, Alfresco, for your sponsorship and support. And as we bring this webinar to a close, I just want to leave everyone with our speakers' closing thoughts or key takeaways. So I'm going to begin first with Tara Combs from Alfresco. Your closing thoughts today.
I'd just like to thank everybody for attending, and if you'd like to learn more about Alfresco, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you. And Steve Weissman of Holly Group, your closing thoughts today.
Yeah, also thank you, and thank you, Teresa. You really are good at these things and keeping me under control because I get excited and ramble on. As a takeaway, I would just encourage everyone listening not to be afraid to take a close look at the state of things where you work. Take that conceptual step back, look at the business problems that you need to be solving, and see where you are in terms of your ability to solve them. And then we can begin working on peeling back the layers to see how much of it's process, how much of it's policy, how much of it's technology, maybe it's cultural. But you can't make any improvement if you don't first diagnose yourself, if you will. So to me, as I said earlier, the rest is just details. And if you need help or just want to bounce thoughts around, you know where to find me. So thanks all.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we'll see you with our next webinar.